we've gotten through the singles, and a good week for singles, I'd say. So the question was answered, yes, we still can find good singles even when we're cobbling it together on the fly. Can we do the same with albums? Matt, tell us what we need to know about the numbers for Lungfish.
So Lungfish is the first time we're covering them. This is Rainbows from Adams, and it's ranked in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums at number 10,192, number 961 in 1993, number 65,608 of all time. It is Lungfish's second highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 1999's The Unanimous Hour. Did not make Rolling Stone's list, and Lungfish is ranked number 16,567 of overall artists on Best Ever Albums.
Quick rundown of Lungfish for those at home. Formed in 1990 in Baltimore, Maryland. Styles, alternative indie rock, post-hardcore, American underground, alternative pop/rock, and probably the genre they're kind of, it seems like, most known for is early emo. I'm surprised they didn't put proto-emo on this. So band members over the years were Asa Osborne, Daniel Higgs, Mitchell Feldstein, or Feldstein, depending on how you choose to say it, Sean Meadows, John, I believe it's Christ, one of the two. I apologize for those listening. I'll do my cleaning of the stacks later. And then Nathan Bell. So that's the members of the group who were here. We'll put together who was on it when we talk about the album, but we don't do really long bios on these thrown together bonus episodes. We kind of go right into the meat of the episode. So what'd you think of this one, Matt? I bet Lungfish was not on your bingo card.
It was not. No, I never heard of them. So this was new. And actually, when I try to get more information on this album, this album doesn't have a Wikipedia page. And in fact, none of their albums has a Wikipedia page. And Lungfish themselves barely have a Wikipedia page, and they have like 15 albums. So this is pretty underground, even from our standards. So I will say that this was an interesting listen for me. I'm starting to it helped me kind of understand some of the puzzle pieces and the breadcrumbs that have kind of been leading up to this sound, because I think that overall this sound is one that I'm pretty familiar with, even though I'm not familiar with them. This sound reminded me of a number of different friends, a number of different bands that I've heard that these friends listened to, and certain styles. So as soon as I kind of heard it, I reached out to a couple of them, like, have you heard of this band? And
friends
like,
we covered on this show.
What's that?
I said, and bands we've covered on this show too.
Yes.
Callback.
Yes. But it kind of stood out to me, and my initial thought when I first heard it, I'm like, okay, this is kind of like emo, and it's kind of like hardcore, and then I looked it up. It's like, exactly what you're saying. It's like, post-hardcore,
emo-core,
emo-core, exactly, all that stuff. And then I started thinking, I was like, yeah, that's really, kind of, because I've historically have said I'm not really a fan of hardcore. A lot of bands that I've heard, it's kind of off-putting, but looking back on a lot of the bands that we've covered that have fallen into that category, there's actually many of them I've kind of enjoyed to a certain extent. And emo is also the way that I hear emo now. It's not really something that's one of the first genres that I go to, or that I'm really well versed in a lot of different bands. But there's something about this sound here that they're doing, because I think it's emo, but it's different, right? It's different than, like, I don't know. I kind of just equate the emo that I hear these days. It's a very similar vocal style, and this guy's not doing that vocal style. It's that one's kind of like much more of a high pitched kind of vocal style. This is a gruffer, kind of grimier vocalization that I'm hearing here, and I think I like that better than the higher pitched vocal styles. But overall, I think this is a really strong record. There's a ton of energy. It kind of starts right off the bat, just with a great. It's a very simple song. They're barely changing any chords or anything like that, but it just kind of hits you right away, and it's like, all right, we're gonna get a pretty energetic, emotional record here, and it kind of doesn't really let up, throughout. So I really did enjoy it. It does suffer a little bit from some sameness. It's not a terribly long record. I think it's under 50 minutes. But and also I felt like, and then they do that thing with, like, that song, what is it, Creation Story, or where it's kind of like it's kind of a song, but not really. There's music in the background, but it's all spoken word about, it's a commentary on, how humans, came to be from evolutionary standpoint, and then how we've kind of screwed everything up, and how we cling to televisions and guns, and how we just it's definitely a social commentary on how humans are not the greatest influence on the planet. That song actually reminded me a little bit of Slint from Spiderland. There was a kind of there's tying a little bit of that together because it's a very minimalist song, but Slint had some spoken word stuff too on Spiderland. So I think my big takeaway is just kind of really kind of thinking more about the lineage of some of these genres, of how they kind of morphed into, where emo came from. Or this definitely, I would say proto emo is probably a better, genre descriptor than just regular old emo. I like post-hardcore as well. I think that's kind of that's fitting as well. And I like the guy's voice. I like the guitars. I like the production here. It's a very, it's a raw type sound, and it's just got great guitar sounds, great energy, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sign me up for discovery of Lungfish. I liked it. My first notes, just like you, about as I was listening, were like, I'm like, this sounds like hardcore, but it also sounds a lot like emo. So I wrote down notes, and that just kept coming up, and I said, there's a little bit of a Fugazi lane, and then I wrote down, and I mean, it wasn't hard to see the connection to Fugazi, right? I mean, there's a lot.
Well, they're on the label that Ian MacKaye started, right? Isn't it from
I found that out
the Discord
later.
label? Yeah,
I found that out later, but like as I'm listening to it real time,
right?
And I'm like, and there's a little bit of Henry Rollins energy here, and that whole SST deal. So it wasn't particularly hard to figure out where this came from. And then when you look at the background, you're like, oh yeah, it came together. And then I wrote down the second time I listened to it, I said, and I had a friend who's very into hardcore and this type music, the one who kind of, when we covered Fugazi, was like, I didn't know you weren't listening to me all these years when I was telling you to listen to Fugazi, John. I'm like, yeah, I know. But he was kind of appalled by that. But I wrote down, I think this album is what I thought the Jawbreaker album was going to be, but it wasn't. Oh. And I'm like, but this is like what I thought it was going to be, and I like. And so I texted that to my friend. And my friend goes, did you mean to say Jawbox? And I'm like, no, like not Jawbox, Jawbreaker. He's like, no, because that album sounds a lot like Jawbox. And I'm like, is he like, what the fuck's going on? I'm like, no, I'm saying Jawbreaker. I'm like, looking. And then there is a band called Jawbox. They are someone who they said was influenced by. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, so like I'm hearing it as like what I think Jawbreaker, which has at least some similarities to this, right? But I'm like, I think that's what I thought it was. And then there's this other band, Jawbox, and then to fully square the circle, we'll be covering an album by Jawbox later. So I'd already had it on our list to cover. So all right, we'll I guess later I'll be able to figure out if this sounds like Jawbox. But I thought that was kind of funny. Like I thought we were speaking slightly off, but
it's like an Abbott and Costello routine.
But I really like this. I like the seriousness of it. That's where like the hardcore comes in a little bit, and the repetitiveness and sort of the mantra style stuff. I heard someone describe them as stoic, which I thought was a great word for their sound. It is a little bit stoic in terms of their lyrical content and sort of their discipline on the way they play their their instruments, right? And their musicianship. I thought that was a good word to describe the sound of this. And monastic, right? That's another word I heard, which I always think of with like hardcore music as well, like sort of stripped down, no extra frills, not spending more on production than you have to kind of leave a little bit of the rawness to it. That all those were here, but there's a brightness and a prettiness to this as well, which is why it's not quite hardcore. And that's the emo part, where you're like, oh, there's an emotional resonance to this, as opposed to just one emotion, anger, right? You know what I mean? Or indignation, right? There's that here, but there's also sort of, it's the way that they're somewhat indignant at times doesn't seem like they're screaming at you. It's sort of more like you're being chanted at, or you're being told somewhere between like urgently and earnestly. Like I can't really describe it, but that's kind of how it really spoke to me. And I thought the lyrics were good on this album. Even though there was sort of repetition by choice in terms of the sound. I liked the guitar parts that they used,
Yeah.
and it kind of all came together for me. So this one's a recommend for me for sure.
Yeah, they've got 12 albums I counted, and the most
Wow.
recent one was from 2012. Yeah, it's just funny. I'm like, usually I can't. I thought that there was a Wikipedia entry for just about every album,
Well, it's
and they don't
also
have one for any of it. They're very underground, apparently.
so many bands that we've covered on this that I've never heard before. Not
Sure.
certainly all of them, but many of them I'm like, oh, I came across the name of this band, or someone's brought it up to me, or in a music magazine or anything. I don't think I ever remember hearing the name Lungfish anywhere in terms
Yeah.
of my travels, or somebody who told me check this out, or hey, this is this week's capsule review of Lungfish. It didn't come, so it was really a blank slate. And I, when we do these bonus episodes, I try to pick one where I'm like, all right, this was well received by people that I usually like their taste in music. Let's just throw it at the wall and see if it
Yeah.
sticks. And this week it did.
Oh, for sure. No, it's it's just there's lots of elements here that I like, and you're right. There's some repetitive natures, parts of the song, but they just find these sounds and these grooves that are just really good. And maybe if I was just, I don't know, more familiar with it, I wouldn't find it as samey, but it tailed off just a tad for me towards the end. But every time I put it on, I was like, yes. Like, so it certainly would have me, it would pass your test, John, of do I want to listen to more of this? And I
Right.
think that the answer for that is yes.
Nice. So 2 thumbs up on this one.
Yeah.